want to talk about a really interesting topic. An admin of another Facebook group caught me in a chatty mood one day, and she was messaging me. And usually my message response is, I get hundreds of these a week. I'm sorry, I can't answer you. But she was smart. She threw her weight around and said, hey, I'm an admin of this group. Do you think you could help me out? So she had a dog with cancer, and we talked about a few things. But the one thing that I'd kind of like to get out of the way, I think there's a myth that a dog with cancer should not eat any carbohydrate. And I think that's a mistake. We hear that all the time, especially from people who want to buy, like a lot of customers who want to buy Red Rover, which is a berry blend, right? Berries are actually really low glycemic load anyway, but they're carbohydrate. So people who have dogs with cancer, they're like, oh no, I can't feed my dog berries because he has cancer. But they're missing out on the potent cancer and inflammation fighting property of berries. Here's the thing, and we've all heard this, that cancer cells like to eat glucose, which is like a blood sugar. So we concentrate on not feeding our dogs any carbohydrate because we're like, sugar feeds cancer. And it's true, sugar does feed cancer, but carbohydrate doesn't. So 2 points. First of all, carbohydrate, where do I start with this? I'm going to do 1 point here.
It's a big topic.
It's a complicated topic, and I might be going about this backwards. But here's the superpower that berries and insoluble starches have, like fibers, is that they fuel your dog's immune system. And they feed his gut bacteria, which is what fuels your dog's immune system. What's really, really fascinating is, and this is a point I want to get across to everybody who owns a dog, and this is why we did the Healthy Dog Challenge. And that is that cancer, in most cases, just like any other chronic disease, is chronic inflammation. It's caused by chronic inflammation. It's this chronic inflammation that changes the DNA in cells, that activates the cytokines, that starts to cause that rapid growth and mutation. And it's inflammation that forms all of these free radicals, which again damage DNA and cause cells to grow out of control and to mutate. So cancer, most, if not all forms of cancer, it's inflammation. It's inflammation.
Like any chronic disease is inflammation, right?
Yeah, we talk about inflammation like almost every week, it seems like.
Yeah. Everybody thought heart disease was due to eating like saturated fats. And it is, but not directly. We all get this illusion that saturated fats travel through the bloodstream and start sticking to the arteries and clogging them up. And that's what when I was in university, what they largely believed. But what it is that saturated fats are inflammatory. And it's that inflammation that causes the plaques to form in arteries. It's an inflammatory condition that is caused by the consumption of saturated fats. I don't know, and we're just tossing some ideas around because there's two new pieces of the cancer puzzle that a lot of people aren't talking about that I'd kind of like to share with you guys. And the first is the belief that dogs, again, shouldn't have any carbohydrate. First of all, Yes, cancer cells eat glucose, but so does your dog's brain and nervous system. And if your dog does not have enough circulating glucose, he'll pass out
Mm.
and then he'll die because his brain and his nervous system need glucose. So you're never going to be able to starve cancer cells enough of glucose that they'll stop growing. You just can't. They're always going to have glucose, and because glucose is so important to your dog's brain, his liver can convert protein and fat to a lesser extent, but mostly protein into glucose. If your dog's brain needs glucose, then the protein that he's eating anyway is going to get converted to glucose and to feed his brain. So I don't want people to think that sugar feeds cancer because that is overly simplified. Certainly, simple sugar like table sugar, it's inflammatory. It doesn't directly feed cancer cells, but it's inflammatory and it causes a big glucose spike, and that will potentially feed cancer cells. But high starch,
Hello.
yeah, Alex is here.
Hi.
But high starch foods, not high starch, high insoluble fiber foods like berries, what else? What else is high in fiber? Berries, vegetables, fibrous types of carbohydrate. Those are anti-inflammatory. They feed the bacteria in your dog's gut, and in turn those bacteria will produce short-chain fatty acids, and those short-chain fatty acids will feed your dog's immune system and help fight inflammation.
I think fiber and complex carbs, it's really important to distinguish, right? I mean, people think, they think carbs are scary, but in fact, it's starch that's scary. And so that's why you don't want to feed your dog kibble ever, not just when he has cancer. And, I have a bit of perspective on this because, I had heart disease a couple of years ago. I mean, I still have it, I guess, technically. But I was diagnosed with diabetes at the time, which I have resolved with diet. I'm not on any medications. And I monitor my blood sugar. And so I see blood sugar spikes. I see what happens when I eat things. And eating berries does not spike my blood sugar. Eating leafy green veggies or, asparagus in an omelet does not spike my blood sugar. But eating starch does. A piece of bread, it zooms upwards. So you start to learn what triggers your blood sugar, and I've learned a lot with that. And I know that there are some things, if I eat them, my blood sugar is going to go zooming up. It comes back down again. So like fruits like berries, because they're fibrous, they don't spike your blood sugar like that. And berries are low in sugar anyway. But if I were to eat something like mango or watermelon, that would, because those are very high sugar fruits. So I think you have to really be careful and think about, the fiber in what you're eating or what you're giving your dog too, because that slows down the blood sugar spike.
The other thing is too, if you're in a situation where you have to feed your dog kibble or you have to feed him something that's got something starchy or a little bit sugary in it, I can't imagine what that would be, but for budget reasons, a lot of people do need to feed their dog kibble. The best thing that you can do is take your dog for a walk after he eats the starch, because the body loves glucose because it's so easy to use. So if there's circulating glucose after your dog eats a starchy meal, and there will be, what will happen is if you exercise your dog and take him for just a walk right after he eats, then what's going to happen is all of that glucose is going to get diverted to his muscles to be used as instant fuel, and it's less likely to feed the cancer cells.
That's actually kind of like marathon runners carbo loading, right? I don't know if they still do this, but remember, runners used to have like big spaghetti dinners the night before a marathon because that gave them more glucose for fuel.
It actually gives them more glycogen.
Yeah. Okay.
So glycogen is a precursor to glucose. And glycogen is stored, a tiny bit is stored in your muscles, but most of it is stored in your liver. So it's called glycogen loading. So then what they would do is they go for a long run, a day or two beforehand, and they would not eat any carbohydrate. And then that would deplete the liver of glycogen. And then they'd load up the night before a marathon on starchy foods. And they found that if you deplete the liver and then load up the next day, that it can store more glycogen, which just gives you more usable energy for. So it's a little bit different because that's doing it the day before. What you want to do is you actually want your dog to use up that glucose before it's even converted to glycogen.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So you think about it, all that sugar is flowing around in his body. If you're in a situation where you have to feed your dog the kibble, again, go walk him while all that sugar is out there, because it'll get allocated to his muscles and less so to the cancer cells.
Interesting.
Yeah. That makes sense when you explain it.
Yeah. So, I think, don't get me wrong, a lot of people have success with a ketogenic diet for dogs with cancer, but there's two, and I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I've had dogs with cancer, and I did not do a ketogenic diet with them, and 2 years later they're still with me. And the reason it feels a little bit creepy to me, I think there's 3 reasons. First of all, the thing about the ketogenic diet is that it essentially starves your dog. Well, of course, if you starve your dog, you're going to starve his tumor cells. There's less to eat for your dog and his inhabitants. So I think that's a really big confound with the ketogenic diet, is that you're starving your dog, and that starvation alone is enough to cause, to slow down the tumor growth. The second is it's unnatural, and I don't like, obviously dogs naturally, we don't like to throw unnatural approaches at our dog, because the further away you get from what nature intends for your dog, the more problematic things become, right, Julia?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's when you start going into side effect land. And we don't essentially want to, because you have to remember that you're not treating a tumor, you're treating your dog. Whatever you do to manage that tumor, your dog has to deal with. So feeding your dog a biologically incorrect diet, I think is short-sighted. I think it's short-sighted.
Yeah. It's interesting. We had Dr. Judy Jasek on Doctor's Rounds last night, and she talked about, she does a lot of holistic treatment of cancer. And her approach is, you've got to support the body. And that's how you tackle cancer. She said, I don't even need to know what kind of cancer it is half the time. I just need to support the body so it can fight the cancer itself. And so she does do some keto diet, but she does it very gradually. She adds, she feeds a regular diet, and then she adds in maybe some natural supplements, things like mushrooms, CBD, that kind of type of thing. But also, she said, if she does increase the fat, she does it slowly. And you see how the dog responds, because every individual is different, right? So, it's a process of really helping the body to help itself. It's not the typical kind of, she said instead of fighting cancer, support the body. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's what you're doing. When you feed a natural diet to your dog, you're letting the body do the work it knows how to do.
Yeah, we always forget. It's funny, we forget about the immune system. And the immune system, listen, I guarantee your dog has cancer right now, right? Guaranteed you have cancer right now. But the only reason why it's not becoming big malignant tumors is the immune system.
Right.
You live with cancer, and so does your dog every single day. Just like your dog is exposed to viruses every day and parasites every day. And what we tend to do is completely bypass the immune system and go, get out of my way, you thing that Mother Nature has perfected over billions of years. Ooh, sorry.
What was that?
I just knocked the microphone.
Just-
That was a bit of a clunk.
She slapped the microphone right there.
We're like, get out of our way, immune system. I'm going to I'm just going to attack this cancer with toxic drugs or weird foods or weird fads that might not be in my dog's best interest. And that's why I want you to view cancer and everything else as an inflammatory disease. If what you are doing to treat your dog's cancer is inflammatory, then you're in trouble. It's probably not going to work. And now Dana's notifications are going off because she's like really awesome.
Ping.
I'm surprised it took that long. So that's another problem that I have with the ketogenic diet. And the third one is certain types of fats and less so certain amounts of fats are inflammatory. So high-fat diets increase the risk of lots of different cancers, mostly like prostate and colorectal, especially. Yeah. But saturated fats are particularly problematic for me. And you've heard me kind of speak out about things like coconut oil and other sources of saturated fats. And let me just pull this up a little bit here because I think this is worth looking at. Saturated fats are very inflammatory for your dog. They feed the wrong bacteria. Okay, so they feed species of bacteria that poop out metabolites that ramp up inflammation in your dog. And here's the problem that we have with saturated fats right now. And is that showing? Okay.
Yep.
So this here is comparing the fat content of wild deer to domestic beef. And in the blue there, we have the saturated fats. And you can see obviously that there's twice as much, twice as much saturated fat in the cow than there is the deer. So and it's just the way of the world. Most of us are feeding our dogs animals that are fed grains. They're not improperly fed. So their saturated fats are high and they're inflamed because their omega fatty acids are also out of balance. And this alone is a problem. And this is why, if you can afford it, grass-fed and grass-finished animals are better. Now, imagine Mother Nature intends your dog to eat the amount of saturated fat that's in a deer. And you're feeding him cows instead. He's getting twice as much saturated fat as he should be getting. And this starts to mess with the balance in his microbiome, and this starts to cause chronic inflammation. Now imagine if you put your dog on a ketogenic diet and a lot of that is saturated fat.
Whoa, yeah. It then becomes pretty much all fat.
Yeah. So if as Judy Jasek said, if you're considering a ketogenic diet for your dog, work with somebody who's really good at it, because this has the potential to be really, really bad for your dog.
Yeah, and Ian Billinghurst says that too in his book about cancer. He says you've got to work with somebody who knows how to do it right, because it's very important to get the balance right. Don't just do it yourself. Don't just throw a bunch of extra fat in the diet and think you've achieved it.
So
100%.
This isn't just a simple Google search.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really not. Now, if you're not going to go full ketogenic, then obviously, if you look at this, adding polyunsaturated fatty acids or PUFAs to your dog's diet is a good idea. Adding coconut oil is a bad idea because coconut oil is high in saturated fat. You shouldn't do it. Your fats are already unbalanced. And now if you add coconut oil or any or butter or any other source of saturated fats, you're just going to make this imbalance worse. And if we look at poultry and we compare chicken to the pheasant, again, almost twice as much saturated fat. So it's not just in ruminants that this happens. So
it's wild versus domestic. I assume those were wild pheasants, not domestically grown ones.
So it's something that I want you to be aware of. Don't just go, oh, geez, my dog has cancer. Or worse yet, a lot of people put their dogs on a ketogenic diet hoping they don't get cancer. Guys, ketogenic diet is a fix. It's unnatural. And to put your dog on this for his entire life, I think is problematic. Because Mother Nature wants your dog across the board. And we did this in the, I think it was a raw food certification course, Dr. Meg Smart and I. We found this research where they were analyzing animals that they fed to zoo animals. And just carcasses that they're throwing over the fence, right? And they were largely, wild animals. And what they found was, on average, and there wasn't a lot of variation, they were 10% fat, 20% protein. Twice as much protein as fat. So I honestly think in most cases we should be closer to that in our dog's diets. And one more point is, if you can find so let's say, well, I have to feed my dog beef. Okay, great. Feed the lowest fat beef that you can afford. If you can feed like 90% lean beef, now your dog's not getting as much total saturated fat. And if you need to add fat to the diet, then you can add it in the form of oils. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I just wanted you guys to see that. So that's kind of, my cursor don't show. Can somebody kick me out of this? You can't, can you?
I can't.
No, it's not oh, wait a minute. View options.
See
No,
her?
I can't.
Chelsea might be able to.
Oh, yeah.
You can?
Look at us go. Figuring it all out.
Cursor still doesn't work. Okay, I'm just assuming you all can see me. So
Yeah, and so grass-fed meats would be closer to what they would be like in nature too. So if you can do grass-fed, grass-finished, that makes a big difference.
grass finished.
And also because the cow then also is not fed grain, which promotes inflammation in the cow, because that's not what the cow's stomach or series of stomachs is supposed to digest.
Yeah. And let me share another slide, because I think let's give it a shot, because I want you guys to see this as well, because this is further to Julia's point, where the longer the animal is in the feedlot, okay, the more messed up his fats get. Okay, that there is a loss in omega-3 fats, which is pretty gross. They just get decimated the longer the animal's in the feedlot. Hey, Chelsea, can you kick me out again?
Sure.
I don't know. To me, the keto diet's never made logical sense to me in terms of just like, it doesn't feel right to give that much fat to anything.
Yeah.
Well, and at the expense of nutrients like that are in things like vegetables. Because a lot of people, I think people do different types of keto diets, and probably for their dogs too, where they ignore the fiber. You don't get any fiber on a strict keto diet. You just get protein and fat. Yeah. And people are like surviving on bacon and avocados. It's not really a good long-term prospect.
Like, how is that healthy?
You do lose weight because
it's delicious.
Yeah, fat, but.
So now there was an interesting study There are a couple of interesting studies. And what they're doing is they're giving people with cancer aspirin, and they're doing like long-term longitudinal studies where they just flat out give people aspirin and follow their cancer risk. And across the board, people who are taking aspirin have reduced cancer rates and reduced cancer growth. So then they did another study where they gave them celebrex, which is a COX-2 inhibitor. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, and that really had an impact on cancer cell growth.
So taking away the inflammation.
Yes. So now they're finding that just giving anti-inflammatories decreases cancer growth and metastasis. So that's kind of the takeaway, guys. I want you to view cancer as inflammation and not go overboard with a lot of inflammatory approaches to it, because then you're just working against yourself. And I'm going to make another pitch right now for fruits and veggies, because the one thing that that plant matter has that you cannot get from animal products is polyphenols, these little phytonutrients that are in plants that are immensely anti-inflammatory. So some of the foods that I think you should be looking at if your dog has cancer is number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 should be broccoli sprouts, because they're really, really rich in sulforaphane. And what sulforaphane is a potent NRF2 activator, and the NRF2 pathway is a really important anti-inflammatory pathway that activates a whole bunch of antioxidants too and cleans up that free radical damage. So I think broccoli sprouts and sulforaphane are really important, like super important. And then if you're looking at things like COX-2 inhibitors, the one thing that really comes to mind for me is green-lip mussels. They're incredibly anti-inflammatory, and they absolutely contain compounds and fats that are COX-2 inhibitors. Fish oil will too. The problem with fish oil, apart from raping the ocean, is that that it really only contains 2 fatty acids, which are DHA and EPA. And I'm so excited to write this article, and I bet you are too, because you've been hounding me for it for like 4 months. It is just the various fatty acids that your dog needs. It's not just EPA, and it's not just DHA and loading your dog up with these. And I remember Meg Smart, she hated fish oil, and she said, I don't think you should be artificially giving your dog DHA in those quantities. There's other fatty acids like GLA and SDA and all these ETA, all of these other really important long chain like fatty acids that are in other oil sources, like again green-lip mussel. I just love. Julia, you're taking green-lip mussel too.
I am, yeah. I'm taking the Moxor, yeah.
Yeah. So green-lip mussel oil and green-lip mussel, I think, are super important. And some of your plant oils, like hemp oil, has nice fatty acids in it, like GLA. If you give hemp oil, you would need another source for DHA. But vary your oils. Don't just rely on fish oil for this as well. And of course, berries, because they're just really potent antioxidants. Oh, and on the topic of antioxidants, astaxanthin is a really important antioxidant, and as is SOD. SOD you'll find in algae, in phytoplankton, and again in green-lip mussels. What's cool about green-lip mussels, and we hear this argument a lot with phytoplankton, and because phytoplankton is really expensive. It's really expensive. and and you only give little minuscule amounts. Now it's very bioavailable, but a lot of people say, look, you're giving so little. How much EPA and DHA is your dog really getting from that small amount? So the one cool thing about green lip mussel is, what do you think it eats? Phytoplankton.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
It eats phytoplankton, and it converts it into a more bioavailable and bigger source for your dog. And the good thing about green lip mussel is that, like, unlike any other fish, it can be sustainably farmed. If like most salmon oil is farmed now, and if you're feeding your dog farmed fish or farmed fish oils, then the fish, just like the cow, is eating soy and corn and crapola, and that's all getting dumped into the ocean. And these freaky deaky genetically modified salmon are getting through the nets and breeding with other salmon, and it's a terrible idea. And then so you might be thinking, okay, well, I'll do wild caught. It's like, what? No. Do you have any idea how many people are on this planet, not to mention their dogs and their cats and everything else that we feed fish oil, krill oil, squid oil to? We can't just pull that stuff out of the ocean and think we're going to have like a home in 50 years. We can't. So green lip mussel, because they're only fed phytoplankton, they're sustained, like they can be farmed. They're farmed in New Zealand, where the water is the cleanest probably of anywhere in the world, and now they're sustainable, and we're not dumping crap into the ocean. And if one